The room was electric, humming with tension before a single word was spoken. Bright lights bore down on the stage, the cameras already rolling, capturing every twitch, every breath, every unguarded expression. Then, in a moment that would ignite headlines across the nation, Donald Trump tilted his head back and let out a sharp, mocking laugh. It wasn't just amusement, it was ridicule. A deliberate performance meant to cut, to belittle, to dismiss Barack Obama not as a rival, but as a punchline. Gasps rippled through the audience. Some shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Others smirked along, but the energy had shifted instantly. Trump's laughter wasn't only aimed at Obama. It was aimed at everything he stood for. The immigrant dream stitched into his family story, the quiet dignity that had carried him through storms, the millions who saw in him a reflection of their own struggles and sacrifices. That laugh was more than arrogance. It was contempt, broadcast live. Obama didn't flinch. He didn't roll his eyes, didn't even adjust his posture. His calm presence became a silent counterweight to Trump's theatrics, as if patience itself were a form of defiance. Yet the silence around him only deepened the suspense. The audience leaned forward, wondering, would he respond now, or was he waiting? Across the nation, televisions flickered with the scene. Phones buzzed with notifications. Social media lit up with clips replaying the smirk, the chuckle, the unmistakable sneer. Hashtags began to surge. Trump laughs, Obama moment, clash of titans. In living rooms from Charlotte, NC to Los Angeles, viewers felt their stomachs twist with outrage, curiosity, or dread. Something bigger was unfolding than a debate stage exchange, because laughter has power. It can unite, or it can wound. And in that single moment, Trump had chosen to wield it as a weapon. But weapons, once drawn, demand an answer. The cameras stayed locked on Obama, the silence stretching like a taut wire ready to snap. The nation waited. The world waited. And when the response came, it would not just shift the debate. It would send shockwaves no one could ignore. That laugh might have lasted only a few seconds, but its echo reached far beyond the stage. It wasn't just one man mocking another. It was arrogance aimed squarely at the heart of America's values. In that moment, millions felt the weight of the insult, as if it had been directed at them. For every immigrant who had been told their name was too foreign, for every worker who had been laughed at for daring to dream bigger, Trump's smirk struck a nerve that pulsed with history. The stakes were higher than most realized. This wasn't politics as usual. It was a collision between two visions of the country, one built on disdain, spectacle, and the raw power of insult, the other rooted in dignity, resilience, and the quiet strength of service. Trump's laughter was more than a performance. It was a test of whether America would allow arrogance to define its future, or whether it would reclaim the values that had carried it through struggle after struggle. Across living rooms, the confrontation grew personal. In Charlotte, NC, a mother watching with her children shook her head in disbelief, whispering, "This is what they'll remember." In Chicago, an immigrant family gathered around their television felt the sting of familiarity in Trump's dismissive tone. From coast to coast, people saw their own battles for respect reflected in the way Obama sat, silent but unbroken, beneath the glare of the lights. And yet silence could not last forever. The audience knew it. The moderators knew it. Even Trump seemed to know it, his laughter subsiding into a smug grin as he leaned forward, waiting for a reaction. The power of the moment rested in what would come next, and everyone watching could sense that something seismic was about to break. The national media fanned the flames in real time. Headlines flashed across screens. Trump mocks, Obama live. Laughter or loathing? Social media split down the middle, his supporters cheering the audacity, his critics outraged at the disrespect. Hashtags like arrogance exposed and dignity matters trended side by side. America wasn't just watching a debate. It was watching itself, mirrored back through a clash of character and values. This was bigger than one night. It was bigger than two men. It was about the narrative America would choose to embrace. Would it reward cruelty disguised as strength, or recognize the enduring power of calm under fire? Would it celebrate the sneer, or honor the silence that refused to bend to it? And still Obama waited. Still he sat steady, as though time itself had slowed to let the insult hang in the air just long enough to reveal its ugliness. The tension was unbearable. Every second stretched tighter. Every breath of the audience felt heavier. Because the truth was obvious. This was not the end of the exchange. It was only the beginning. And when Obama finally broke that silence, the answer he gave would not only define the night, it would leave the entire country reeling. To understand the weight of Trump's laugh on that stage, you have to trace the path that shaped him. That smirk, that sneer, that instinct to ridicule. It wasn't born in the moment. It was cultivated over decades, honed into a weapon, sharpened by arrogance and contradiction, until it became his signature. Trump's story began in towers of glass and steel stamped with his name in gleaming gold. He presented himself as the epitome of success, a self-made titan who conquered New York with sheer brilliance. But peel back the facade, and the cracks were visible. The empire he boasted of was seeded not from grit, but from inheritance. His father's wealth underwrote the golden stage, and when his ventures faltered, as they often did, it was bankruptcy courts, tax loopholes, and aggressive spin that kept the image intact. The myth was polished, but the truth was messier. Contractors unpaid, workers left behind, small businesses crushed under the weight of lawsuits. As his empire stumbled, he turned to television, where the character of Donald Trump was born, anew. On The Apprentice, he became the man who could humiliate with a single phrase, "You're fired." Millions tuned in not to watch deals being made, but to watch people stripped of dignity in primetime. Cruelty became charisma, spectacle became strategy. In a culture hungry for drama, Trump discovered that insults drew eyes faster than ideas ever could. So when he entered politics, the transition was seamless. He didn't bring policy papers. He brought punchlines. He branded opponents with demeaning nicknames, mocked appearances, sneered at disabilities, dismissed entire communities with sweeping insults. What had once been a television act became a national campaign. For some, this was refreshing honesty. For others, it was proof of how low politics had sunk. But his obsession with Barack Obama revealed something deeper. Years before the debate, Trump had thrust himself into the spotlight by championing the birther conspiracy, questioning whether the first black president was truly American. Despite evidence, despite facts, he repeated the lie endlessly, fueling suspicion and stoking prejudice. For his supporters, it was entertainment. For millions of others, it was a wound, a reminder of how fragile belonging could be in a country still wrestling with its history of race and identity. This was the heart of Trump's contradictions. He claimed to love America, yet undermined its democratic fabric with conspiracy. He spoke of strength, yet his every move revealed insecurity, an unrelenting need to belittle others to mask his own fear of being overshadowed. He promised loyalty to the forgotten worker, yet built fortunes by stiffing them. He railed against corruption, even as scandals, Trump University, hush money payments, charity misuse, stacked like cards in a house he swore could never fall. Even in relationships, the pattern was the same. Allies were tools, loyalty conditional, betrayal inevitable. Those who praised him were lifted up until the moment they crossed him. Then they were mocked, discarded, ridiculed. The world was a stage for his dominance, every interaction reduced to winner or loser, predator or prey. And in Obama, a man celebrated globally for his intellect, dignity, and calm, Trump saw the ultimate rival. Not because Obama mocked him, but because he didn't need to. Because Obama's presence alone exposed everything Trump wasn't. So that night, when Trump leaned into the microphone and laughed, it wasn't spontaneous. It was the culmination of years of obsession, years of building himself on insult and trying to chip away at Obama's legitimacy. That laugh was a performance, yes, but it was also a confession, a reveal of just how deeply arrogance had consumed him. But arrogance has its cost. It blinds. It convinces the arrogant that the sneer will always win, that ridicule is power, that dominance is permanent. Trump's smirk was meant to humiliate, but instead it crystallized the very flaws that would undo him. His contempt, his contradictions, his cruelty. And as he sat there basking in his own bravado, he had no idea that the silence he provoked was not weakness. It was calculation. It was patience. It was the beginning of a downfall that his own arrogance had scripted. Because villains rarely recognize the moment their story turns. Trump thought he had seized the night with a laugh. In truth, he had set the stage for his undoing. Before Barack Obama ever sat beneath the hot lights of a debate stage, before he faced the smirk of a rival convinced that mockery was power, his life had already been shaped by a series of struggles that would come to define his calm strength. His rise wasn't the product of privilege or spectacle. It was the product of sacrifice, discipline, and an unyielding belief that dignity could carry him through the storms others used to try to break him. Obama's story began in the intersection of two worlds. His father came from Kenya, his mother from Kansas. Their unlikely union gave him a name that many in America stumbled over, a name that marked him as different before he even understood what difference meant. Growing up, he carried questions of identity that never fully disappeared. Was he American enough? Was he black enough? Was there space in this country for someone who seemed to stand between categories? These weren't idle curiosities. They were challenges, sharpened by whispers, doubts, and the quiet but steady sting of being seen as an outsider. Raised largely by his mother and grandparents in Hawaii, Obama lived a childhood far from luxury. Money was tight, but values were rich. His mother instilled in him the belief that education was not just about grades, but about understanding the world and one's place in it. His grandparents, both hardworking and pragmatic, taught him the value of responsibility, humility, and perseverance. Nights were often spent with books as his companions, history as his teacher, and stories of leaders who had bent the arc of justice as his guide. As a young man, he wrestled with questions of belonging. He felt the pull of anger at injustice, the temptation of cynicism, the weight of not quite fitting into the molds society tried to impose. But instead of letting that confusion calcify into bitterness, he sought clarity through service. He moved to Chicago, where steel mills had shut down and neighborhoods were abandoned, where families struggled to hold on to hope. There, as a community organizer, he knocked on doors, sat at kitchen tables, and listened to stories of pain and resilience. He didn't come with easy answers. He came with presence. And in that presence, he learned that leadership was not about commanding the loudest voice, but about hearing the quietest ones. This work didn't bring him fame. It barely paid his bills. But it gave him purpose. He saw that real power wasn't in tearing others down. It was in lifting them up. That lesson would become the thread woven through his entire career. The road forward was never smooth. When he decided to enter politics, he was met with skepticism. His opponents said he was too young, too inexperienced, too different. They whispered that America wasn't ready for someone with his skin, his name, his background. He faced every kind of coded insult and outright attack, yet he carried himself with steadiness, refusing to be dragged into the mud. His shield was dignity. His weapon was composure. When he stood on the steps of the U.S. Capitol in 2009, becoming the first black president of the United States, it was more than a personal triumph. It was a collective one. Immigrants saw in him the embodiment of their dreams. Black Americans saw a chapter of progress written on the pages of their ongoing struggle. Young people saw possibility where cynicism had once lived. His presidency didn't erase inequality or division, but it symbolized the possibility of bending history, however slightly, toward justice. And yet, even as he governed, the attacks never ceased. He was accused of being un-American, of being illegitimate, of being foreign. None of those assaults were more persistent than the campaign waged by Donald Trump, who sought to delegitimize him through lies about his birth and his identity. For Obama, those smears were not just about him. They were about the millions of others who carried names, faces, and stories that America too often dismissed. But through it all, he chose restraint over rage. He chose to let his work, his words, and his examples speak louder than insults. His legacy became one of balance, the ability to absorb cruelty without letting it corrode his spirit, the ability to meet disdain with grace, the ability to answer arrogance not with anger, but with truth. So when he sat on that stage, hearing Trump's laugh echo across the hall, Obama was not simply a man caught in the moment. He was the sum of every challenge, every sacrifice, every act of resilience that had prepared him for it. He carried on his shoulders the weight of families who had sacrificed everything for their children. He carried the pride of immigrants who had been told they didn't belong. He carried the dignity of communities who had endured mockery but never surrendered their worth. That night, his silence was not emptiness. It was history. It was every lesson his life had taught him, distilled into a single posture of composure. And in that silence was a promise, not just that he would answer, but that his answer would be more than a rebuttal. It would be a reminder of who he was and who America still could be. The stage was set. The insult had been delivered. The nation held its breath. And when Obama finally broke that silence, his words would not only define the night, they would expose, once and for all, the difference between arrogance and dignity. The laugh had done its work. At least, that's what Trump believed. He leaned into the microphone, his grin spreading wider as if he could taste the victory before the battle had even begun. The audience's murmurs gave him fuel, and with a theatrical wave of his hand, he launched his next volley. "You know, folks," he sneered, "Barack here talks a good game. All these speeches, all this hope and change nonsense. But let's be honest, he left America weaker. He left us embarrassed. The world laughed at him just like I'm laughing now." Some cheers rang out from Trump's corner of the audience, but they were mixed with uneasy groans. Still, he pressed on, raising his voice, filling the hall with insults meant not to persuade, but to belittle. He was a mistake. The only reason he got the job was because people felt sorry for him. That's the truth. Nothing more. No talent, no real accomplishment. Just pity. The words hung like daggers in the air, sharp and cutting. Gasps rippled through the audience, followed by scattered boos. Even the moderators glanced nervously at one another, unsure if they should intervene. Yet through it all, Obama remained still. His hands folded, his posture upright, his gaze steady. Not a flicker of emotion crossed his face. That silence began to unnerve Trump, though he wouldn't admit it. He thrived on reaction, anger, outrage, fear. But here, he found nothing to grip. It was like punching into fog. The more he swung, the more he revealed his desperation, so he doubled down. This man, this so-called leader, couldn't even handle the economy, couldn't handle foreign policy, couldn't even handle his own healthcare plan. Weak, ineffective, a fraud. His voice rose with every insult, sharp and erratic, like a boxer throwing wild punches in the final round. Sweat began to bead at his temples, his smirk hardening into a scowl. The once playful laugh had curdled into something harsher, meaner. He needed Obama rattled. He needed him dragged into the mud where he felt strongest. But Obama gave him nothing. The audience noticed. Viewers at home noticed. Social media noticed. Screens lit up with commentary. Why isn't Obama saying anything? This is uncomfortable. Trump is losing it. Every second of silence heightened the contrast. Arrogance unraveling on one side, composure solidifying on the other. Then came the line that tipped the night into dangerous territory. Trump leaned close to the mic, his tone dripping with mockery. Barack Obama didn't earn the presidency. He stole it from people who actually deserved it. That's the truth. The hall erupted. Shocked gasps, angry shouts. Even some of Trump's supporters looked uneasy. The moderators tried to regain control, but the tension was too high, the atmosphere too charged. And still, Obama didn't move. He didn't blink. His calm became louder than Trump's rage, a silence so commanding that it shifted the entire dynamic of the room. For the first time, Trump's bluster began to sound hollow. For the first time, his insults sounded less like dominance and more like desperation. Viewers at home felt it too. The balance of power had shifted, though no word had yet been spoken. The crowd leaned forward, waiting, breathless. What would Obama say? How would he answer? Could calm truly stand against chaos? The suspense grew unbearable. Trump was still, ranting, but fewer were listening. Eyes and ears were fixed on Obama, on the man who had endured every insult without breaking, because everyone knew the silence couldn't last forever. And when it broke, it would not simply be a rebuttal. It would be a reckoning. The noise in the hall had reached a fever pitch, Trump's voice rising with every insult, the audience gasping, murmuring, shouting, social media exploding in real time. But at the center of it all sat Barack Obama, unmoved. His stillness was its own weapon, a quiet reminder that composure can command more power than chaos ever will. Then, slowly, he leaned toward the microphone. The room hushed almost instinctively, the way a storm quiets before a lightning strike. Trump kept talking, but his words faltered as the silence deepened, swallowed whole by the anticipation of what was coming. Obama began softly, his voice measured and calm. "You know," he said, pausing just long enough for the tension to thicken, "it's always interesting when people confuse leadership with noise, when they think strength comes from who can laugh the loudest, insult the harshest, or dominate the microphone the longest." He looked briefly in Trump's direction, not with anger, but with something that landed harder: pity. "But America has never been built on mockery. It's been built on sacrifice, on service, on dignity." The crowd erupted, cheers bursting like a wave. Obama raised a hand, and the room stilled again. He wanted his words to land without distraction. "My father came here from Kenya with nothing in his pockets but hope," he continued, his voice steady. "He believed that in America you could work hard, hold your head high, and give your children a life better than your own. That belief carried him, and it carried me. And it's the same belief carried by millions of families in this country. Immigrants, workers, people who have been mocked, doubted, and dismissed. They are not a punchline. They are the backbone of this nation." Trump shifted uneasily in his chair, his smirk tightening, his eyes darting across the crowd. "And yes," Obama said, his tone rising now, filled with quiet conviction, "I have heard insults like these before. I have been told my name was too different, that my skin made me unfit, that my story didn't belong in America's story. But the truth is simple. What disqualifies a leader is not their background. It's not where they come from. What disqualifies a leader is whether they lift people up or tear them down." The hall shook with applause. Hashtags surged online. Obama strikes back, mic drop moment, dignity over disdain. Commentators scrambled to keep up, some whispering that the night had just turned. Obama pressed on, his cadence now unmistakably powerful. Leadership isn't about lawsuits. It isn't about sneers. It isn't about how many people you can humiliate in front of a camera. Leadership is about service. It's about responsibility. It's about making this country stronger, not smaller. United, not divided. Hopeful, not hateful. The audience was on its feet. Even those who had been silent moments earlier were swept up in the force of his words. Trump opened his mouth to interrupt, but the crowd drowned him out with thunderous applause. Obama waited patiently for the noise to subside, then leaned in again, lowering his voice so the room had to lean with him. "Because here's the truth," he said. "Laughter fades. Insults are forgotten. But dignity endures. Service endures. And the America I believe in, the America millions of us believe in, will endure long after the noise is gone." The hall exploded again, chants rising, people clapping, shouting, some even in tears. The camera cut to Trump, his face flushed, his jaw tight, his hands fidgeting against the podium. For the first time that night, his laugh was gone. And still, Obama did not gloat. He didn't smile smugly or raise his voice in triumph. He simply leaned back, folded his hands, and let the silence after his words carry the weight. That silence, once a weapon of Trump's mockery, was now transformed into a verdict. Across the country, living rooms erupted in cheers. Parents pointed to their children and said, "That is how you answer hate." Young people tweeted that they finally felt seen. Immigrants wrote messages about the validation they felt, and news networks began drafting headlines before the debate even ended. Obama's calm takedown shifts the night. From laughter to silence, Trump rattled. Trump tried to recover, muttering about weak leadership and fake strength, but his words sounded hollow now. His bluster drained of energy. Every attempt to fight back felt smaller, less convincing, overshadowed by the clarity of what Obama had just delivered. Because this wasn't just a rebuttal. It was a dismantling. With patience, with grace, with composure, Obama had exposed the emptiness of arrogance. He had shown that true power doesn't need to shout, doesn't need to sneer, doesn't need to dominate. True power is the ability to stand tall, speak truth, and let dignity do the work. The cameras zoomed in on the stage. One man slumped, rattled, his smirk gone. The other sat calm, steady, unmoved. The contrast told the story more vividly than words ever could. Arrogance undone by grace, mockery defeated by dignity. And as the applause stretched on, as the hashtags surged, as the world processed what it had just witnessed, one thing became clear. This was not just the climax of a debate. It was the turning point of a cultural reckoning. But what came after? The ripple effect through headlines, through social media, through communities across the nation, would take the night's drama and magnify it into something far bigger. And no one, not even Trump, was prepared for the shockwaves that followed. The applause hadn't even finished echoing inside the debate hall before the moment had already escaped into the bloodstream of America. Clips of Obama's calm dismantling of Trump rocketed across social media within minutes, replayed in endless loops on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook. The contrast between Trump's sneer and Obama's unshakable delivery became the split-screen image of the night. Arrogance on one side, dignity on the other. Hashtags surged like wildfire. Idan's mic drop moment shot to the top within half an hour. Dignity over disdain trended alongside Trump rattled and Obama speaks. Creators layered Obama's words over music, slowed down his pauses for dramatic effect, and cut reaction shots of the stunned audience. One TikTok edit titled "The Laugh That Died" racked up millions of views before the debate was even over. Celebrities chimed in almost instantly. A-list actors praised the calm ferocity of Obama's response. Musicians reposted the clip with captions like, "That's how you silence a bully." A basketball star simply tweeted, "Dignity, disrespect." Obama, and it was retweeted hundreds of thousands of times. Even late-night comedians, normally eager to lampoon both sides, framed Trump as the punchline, replaying his smirk before cutting to Obama's steady gaze. News networks scrambled to keep up. Anchors replayed the exchange on loop, analysts dissecting each pause, each glance, each phrase. "This wasn't just a comeback," one commentator said breathlessly. "It was a reckoning." Another added, "Trump came with laughter, Obama answered with legacy, and that legacy won tonight." But the impact wasn't limited to pundits or celebrities. Ordinary Americans made the moment their own. A mother in Charlotte, NC, posted a video of her children watching Obama's takedown, writing, "I wanted them to see what grace under pressure looks like." An immigrant father in Chicago tweeted, "For the first time, I felt like my story was spoken out loud." A young college student posted, "Every time I've been underestimated, I'll remember this." Even internationally, the ripples spread. British papers framed it as, "Obama silences Trump." A German outlet called it, "the laugh that backfired." In Africa, headlines celebrated the Kenyan-American son, who once again represented dignity on the global stage. The clip transcended borders, becoming less about politics and more about a universal theme: respect over ridicule. For Trump, however, the aftermath was brutal. His team scrambled to spin the moment, dismissing Obama's words as rehearsed and phony, but the effort fell flat. Memes of his fading smirk and awkward fidgeting circulated endlessly. Commentators noted the shift in his body language after the takedown: shoulders slumping, words faltering, confidence evaporating. His once powerful laugh now looked, in hindsight, like the last roar of a lion who had just realized the cage was closing. The cultural resonance deepened over the following days. Sermons referenced the moment as a lesson in humility. Teachers used it as an example in classrooms of how to respond to bullies with composure. Families replayed it at dinner tables, telling their kids, "This is what strength really looks like." The exchange became a touchstone for conversations about leadership, identity, and what America should aspire to be. Commentators pointed out that this was about more than two men. It was about the narrative of America itself. Would the nation side with arrogance that mocked, or dignity that endured? Would history reward the sneer, or the silence that turned into strength? Obama's words seemed to answer, but the responsibility to carry that answer forward belonged to the people. And so the debate became less about who won or lost, and more about what the moment symbolized. It wasn't just political theater. It was a cultural reckoning. It was a mirror held up to the nation, asking it to choose what it wanted to reflect to the world. But while the applause and hashtags told one story, the deeper question loomed. Would America remember the lesson once? The news cycle moved on? Or would the clarity of dignity versus disdain be drowned out by the next wave of noise? That unanswered question carried the suspense forward. The takedown had shifted the night, but whether it would shift the country remained to be seen. When the headlines finally began to slow and the hashtags started to fade, what lingered wasn't just the memory of a debate stage. It was the moral clarity of a moment when arrogance met dignity and lost. Obama's response had done more than silence Trump. It had reframed the confrontation into a timeless lesson about what true leadership looks like. Commentators tried to score the night as if it were just another contest: who won, who lost, what it meant for polls. But ordinary people spoke in different terms. Parents told their children about the power of patience. Teachers replayed the clip in classrooms, asking students what it means to lead with respect rather than ridicule. Community leaders invoked the moment as proof that composure could withstand cruelty. The conversation moved beyond politics into the realm of values, and values into the realm of identity. Because this wasn't just about two men on a stage. It was about what America wanted to be. Trump's laugh represented a vision of the country. built on sneers, mockery, and division. Obama's calm rebuttal represented another vision, one grounded in service, dignity, and unity. The clash crystallized the question: would America define itself by the volume of arrogance or by the quiet strength of grace? For immigrants, the lesson was deeply personal. In Obama's words, they heard a reflection of their own struggles to be seen and respected in a land that sometimes mocked their accents, their traditions, their names. For Black Americans, his composure in the face of disdain echoed generations of strength carried through civil rights battles. For young people, his example proved that dignity could be powerful, even in a world that often rewarded spectacle. The moral became clear. Dignity is not weakness. Calm is not passivity. Patience is not surrender. These are strengths forged in sacrifice and carried through adversity that can disarm even the most arrogant attacks. Obama showed that night that true leadership doesn't need to shout. It needs only to stand firm in truth. And the resonance stretched beyond politics. Clergy worked the lesson into sermons. Laughter fades, but dignity endures. Coaches told their teams, "Don't answer trash talk with rage. Answer it with results." Families repeated it at dinner tables, grounding their children in the reminder that grace can be as mighty as force. The deeper truth was this: America was being called to make a choice, not about parties or policies, but about its soul. Would it elevate those who mocked sacrifice, or those who honored it? Would it normalize arrogance, or uplift humility? Obama's words weren't just a rebuttal. They were an invitation for the country to decide what kind of nation it wanted to be. And perhaps that's why the moment mattered so much. It was more than a debate. It was a reflection, a mirror held up to a divided country, asking which face it wanted to show the world. Because in the end, Trump's laugh is already fading into history, remembered only as arrogance exposed. Obama's answer, however, continues to echo, not as a line in a transcript, but as a reminder that dignity, service, and unity will always outlast disdain. The night ended with cheers, but the story carried on as a challenge. Would America live up to that lesson, or let it slip away into the noise? Trump laughed at Obama, certain that his mockery would win the night. But what he didn't expect, and what stunned America, was how quickly that laugh collapsed under the weight of dignity. In just a few sentences, Obama transformed a sneer into a mirror, exposing the hollowness of arrogance and reminding the nation of what true leadership looks like. This was never just about one insult. It was about the values at stake, the choice between spectacle and service, division and unity, arrogance and grace. Millions who watched that night saw more than a clash of personalities. They saw themselves, their families, their struggles, reflected in the calm strength that refused to bend. And in that reflection, they felt a sense of pride, validation, and hope. But the lesson can't end here. A single moment, no matter how powerful, only matters if it inspires action. That means carrying this story into our own lives, standing tall when mocked, lifting others when it's easier to tear them down, choosing dignity when arrogance tempts us to stoop lower. If this moment resonated with you, if it reminded you that arrogance fades but dignity endures, don't let the conversation stop. Share this story. Talk about it with friends, family, and community. Let it be a reminder that America is strongest when it chooses unity over ridicule, justice over mockery. And if you want more of these explosive political showdowns, viral stories, and moments of cultural reckoning, subscribe now. Join the movement of people who know that the fight for dignity is far from over, because Trump's laugh was fleeting. But Obama's lesson, that will echo for generations.